Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be wrapping up all the books that I read in the month of April. It's not quite the end of April, but the book that I've started, I just don't think I'm going to finish in the next 2 days. I'm so busy and it's not looking like a possibility. So I was like, let me just wrap up everything now and I'll mention the book that I'm currently reading, and then I'll probably finish it in May and you'll hear about it fully then. But yeah, April was a hectic month, okay? Like essay season, exams, it was honestly, yeah, it was a lot. But this past week I read basically the majority of all the books I'm going to talk about today, or at least I read 4 of them. So yeah, this past week has been a good reading week. But the month of April altogether, not a good reading month. So anyways, let's get into this video, because even though I don't have as many books as I did last month, I'll probably still talk a lot. I'm gonna start with the book that I had to read for class. So the first book is Oxford Street, Accra by Ato Quaison. I had to read this for one of my history courses. I actually wrote a book report on it, so I have a lot of thoughts and opinions, but this is ethnographic and anthropological kind of research on Oxford Street in Accra, Ghana, and it basically traces the history of the country through this one street. I mean, arguably it has a bit more of a broader scope than just Oxford Street. I think Oxford Street is kind of just an entry point into a larger discourse on the history of Ghana. But it was really interesting. So it's split into 2 sections: horizontal archaeologies, and then there is the second half, which I'm forgetting what it's called, morphologies of everyday life. And I personally found the second part of the book the most interesting. It really fit with the introduction, which was very jovial and lively, and had a lot of kind of critical analysis on the social interactions on the street. There's this one section where it's kind of talking about the encounter between a motorist and a pedestrian and the kind of insults they exchange and the kind of social cultures that are produced because of the space relationships on the road. So that was really interesting, and I think the second half of the book kind of follows through with that kind of conversation. The first half, horizontal archaeologies, is very historically dense and kind of jarring when you've just read a very lively intro, but altogether I think this was a solid read. I didn't rate it because I read this for class and like it's a history book kind of, but if you are looking for an interesting history take on like Ghana and like Oxford Street and Accra, I would recommend picking this up. To get into the fiction stuff that I was reading this month, the first book that I read, oh my goodness, like this book set me up for, I was about to say success. I didn't read a lot, but like it just like put me in the mood for a certain type of read, and that is Some Other Now by Sarah Everett. This is my first Sarah Everett book and will definitely not be my last. I loved this story so much. All the vibes that you get from like a realistic fiction, which I feel is like really raw and hard-hitting, but then also like it's a romance and it has that like sweet, light-hearted kind of mist sprinkled in different like places in the story. So the main character is Jessie, and she has always kind of been best friends with the Coen boys, specifically Rowan. He's been her best friend since they were, I believe, 7, and his mom has kind of taken her in as her own daughter. So it's this kind of sweet, almost familial relationship that she's had with this family, and she's always had a crush on Rowan's older brother Luke. So this book actually has 2 different timelines, and you're kind of seeing the intersection of these timelines, I want to say. So there's the summer before, which is the then timeline, and you're kind of seeing the summer that everything just like hit the fan, right? Like that's the summer that you find out Luke and Rowan's mom is sick. It's the summer that Jessie starts exploring this interest or her feelings for Luke a little bit more, and where her relationship with Rowan gets a little rocky. And then you jump to the now timeline, which is present, and you're seeing both Luke and Jessie and the mom and all of the characters in the aftermath of the summer before, and it is just devastating. Like truly, you're reading it because you're like, this is a really sweet romance, but at the same time you're like, there's nothing sweet about any of the things going on in the story. And I personally got quite emotional towards the end. Like I was I was shedding tears. So I enjoyed this book. I think that the two timelines was just an excellent way to kind of convey the severity of what's going on in Jesse and all the other characters' lives, and I would highly recommend this if you're looking for a romance but something that's a little more solemn. There were definitely like moments I was like, this is so cute, but then there's also moments where I was like, I'm about to shed a tear, a fat tear. So I gave this 5 stars. Loved it. Read it. Yeah. Okay, the next book I read, very uncharacteristic for me to be switching between genres the way that I was switching between genres this month, but I was just feeling like 3 different genres, and this is one of them. This is a thriller. I saw this at one of my libraries on campus, and UC, University College, if you go to UT, has the best like literary like fiction book selection. If you're looking for a good read, they have all their bestsellers like out. I love a good Kelly Armstrong book. Like, she's my most read author. I think this is my 11th book from her. So you know I trust her writing, I trust her storytelling, and like this did not disappoint. This is from the Rockton series. I think that's what the series is called. It's the first book. It's called City of the Lost, and it's basically about a town that doesn't exist, and people who go there so they can disappear from the real world. Very off the grid. And this is situated in the Yukon. All of Kelly Armstrong's books are situated in Canada. The main character of this book is Cassie Duncan. She is an exceptional detective, and she has also had a very rocky past. She had quite the encounter with her ex, and it left her in a precarious position where she killed him. And it's not really a secret because it kind of starts, the book starts with the fact that she murdered him. And then her best friend, Diana, has been in this very awful kind of abusive relationship, and she just can't seem to escape her ex-husband. So when Diana kind of recommends that the two of them disappear to this secret town, Cassie is all for it because she wants her best friend, you know, to be safe, and also like her past seems to be creeping back or coming for her. So they have to apply to get into this town. Once they do, Cassie is kind of situated as the lead detective, because in this town there is also a huge kind of mystery, and that is the fact that people have been disappearing. And well, when Cassie arrives, she realizes people are not just disappearing, but they're turning up kind of butchered. There's a serial killer in this town, and it's Cassie's job to kind of figure out what's going on. You kind of see her doing her detective work, Diana is doing her own thing, and then her relationship with the 2 like male sheriff guys, what are their names? Oh, Eric Dalton and then Anders. I don't remember Anders' first name, but they call him Anders. I really, like, this was funny. It was lighthearted, but like not, because people are turning up butchered in this town, like, what? I do have some qualms with the story. However, this takes place in like the Yukon, and there is this assumption that there's nobody there, and if you know anything, you know that there are always people in these wild spaces. Like, Indigenous persons are living, they have communities in these areas of vast nothingness, as you know, the colonial narrative would like us to believe. I didn't really like the way that it sounded like there was nothing going on. But anyways, I gave this book 4 stars, really solid entry into the series that I will be continuing. I even have the second book checked out right now, A Darkness Absolute, and I think this is like Dalton and Cassie get stuck in a snowstorm or something like that. So I'm gonna be reading this in May, even though it's literally giving summer vibes, and then this book is like blizzard. But okay, the next book I read, literally crying, like literally, again with the summer romance vibes. For me, summer romances are so nostalgic, and I don't know, there's just like something about them that makes me like feel almost like melancholic, but also just like in love. So the next book I read is Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. I know everyone was talking about this last summer, and I think it was because people were looking for book recs that kind of reminded them of The Summer I Turned Pretty, which is one of my favorite contemporary romance series. So when this book was recommended, I had to pick it up myself, and I saw it at UC Library as well. So this story is, again, kind of a 2 timeline tale, and I feel like romance stories that have 2 timelines are just like, there's something about it. The way that I love a multi-POV fantasy, I love a 2 timeline like romance story, like because it just keeps you guessing like what happened. So at the beginning of the story, Persephone, or Percy, her and her family purchased like a cabin in Ontario, like I was gonna say rural Ontario, but like by the lake. I don't know where. But they purchased a cabin there, and it turns out that her next door neighbors are 2 boys who are relatively her age. So Charlie is the oldest, and then Sam is her age. And that is how her kind of friendship with the, I don't know what their last names are. What are their last names? Oh, the Floric boys kind of like blossoms, and she's particularly close with Sam. They become like best friends. And of course, like as they get older, because this is throughout several summers, she and Sam fall in love. Jump to the now timeline. You know that something has kind of gone amiss. We don't really know what happened between them, but we do know is that when they were younger they did start dating, and then something happened that made her not return to this town, something happened that made her decide not to return to this town for a good 12 years. So they're in their 30s when we return to this story, and she is getting a call. She gets a call from Charlie, the older brother, to let her know that their mother has just passed away. She had cancer, and that she would have wanted Persephone, or Percy, to be back for her funeral. So she decides to take time off work and basically spend like a weekend or a week back in this town that she grew up in, that she hasn't returned to for 12 years. And of course, like she has to kind of face Sam and Charlie and what happened all those years ago that made her run. If you enjoyed The Summer I Turned Pretty, I think you would enjoy this. It's a little more of an adult version, actually a lot more. It has a bit of spice in it, which I did not really expect that much. So this is definitely like an adult romance. But yeah, in general, I loved the story. It just made me want to lay out on a beach and read a book and, I don't know, like reminisce about my childhood. Like, yeah, I gave this a 4.25 stars. And yes, I've started giving books 0.25 and 0.75 because I realized that sometimes the 4-star or the 4.5 star is just it's not capturing what I'm trying to say when I read a book. So the next book I read, I had to read for my book club, and that is She Would Be King by Waitu Moore. This basically follows our main character, Bessa, and she is indigenous to one of the tribes, I think in like the west coastal region of Africa. So yeah, she's indigenous to the village of Lai, and then there's also 2 other secondary main character narratives, like really secondary. That's June Day, and his mother was a formerly enslaved woman. And then there is also Norman, whose mother was a maroon. All of their narratives kind of culminate around the building of Liberia. We're just kind of waiting for these characters' different lives to converge and see what happens from there. I think for the length of this book, a lot more could have happened, to be honest. Each character has their own kind of gift. And I kind of think of their gifts as all gifts of self-preservation, gifts that are born out of the need to survive, particularly because you have colonial encroachment on indigenous land. So Bessa's gift is the gift of like life or immortality. And then you also have, you know, the kind of purchasing and distributing of enslaved persons. And June Day's gift, having been on a plantation, is bodily resilience and strength. And then you have maroon societies, which were very covert and kind of very difficult for colonial authorities to actually get to because of like the geography and landscape. But Norman's gift is one of invisibility. He can like kind of disappear into thin air. And I think their gifts actually are very interestingly related to like their specific circumstances. There's a lot going on in this story, but at the same time, there's not a lot going on in the story. I feel like there needed to either be a stronger plot or stronger character development, and I just don't know that either happened. So I gave this book a 3.75. I think the writing was stunning, but like the writing cannot just carry the whole story, you know? Okay, and then the last book that I finished this, I was reading this in chapters, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is why I love a good like dark fantasy, okay? And that is A Ruminous Fate by Kaylee Smith. This story, chef's kiss. The main character's name of this book is Calliope, or Calla. I'm thinking of how to explain this because it's kind of complicated. Okay, I'm gonna try and re-explain this because I don't think I explained it well when I initially filmed this, but there are these artifacts called witch's die, and basically every witch has the potential of having to roll the witch's die. It could just appear next to you. 6 actually appear when, or like 6 are created when a new witch is born, basically. So Calla happens to be one of the unlucky, who is 3 rolls away from becoming the last blood warrior. And basically what that means is that once her last 3 rolls are completed, she will end up being in opposition to like the queen witches and like basically all the other witches who are not blood warriors in this war. I feel like I'm not really explaining it well here either, but Calla has just had a really bad streak of luck, and like fate as a concept is like a really prominent thing in like their kind of society. So when she ends up having to roll another die that brings her closer to her fate as being a blood warrior, she starts panicking, and she kind of ends up crossing paths with this guy named Gideon, who happens to be Ezra, her ex's brother, and he also happens to have a similar fate. So he's on a mission to get his rolls erased, and they kind of join together to get their rolls erased by going into this like evil forest, basically, to meet the witch eater, who will inevitably help them erase the rolls. That's the premise of the story. That sounds really obscure, and the story is obscure, but that's a much better description, I think, than what I gave, which, yeah, anyways, yeah. This story is really creative. I think that the magic system was very fascinating. I really like the politics of kind of the war that's brewing. We kind of get like a glimpse into it. I think the next book would definitely be more focused on the war, just because this was a lot of setup, but like it wasn't boring setup. It was like there's a purpose. I feel like a lot of newer fantasy books have been using a good 400 pages to set up absolutely nothing. This book was a lot of setup, but like it was rewarding, and I really, really appreciate that personally. I just really enjoyed this story. I give it a 4.25 rating. Those are all the books that I read this month of April. Let me quickly show you the book I'm currently reading. And that book is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. This story, I just cannot wait to get really into it. I'm like a chapter in, so nothing has really, I mean, actually things have happened. The main character is on the run, so a lot has happened, but I'm really excited to read it and be able to chat with you guys about this next month. Stay tuned for that. It's a bit of a chunky one, but not too chunky. I mean, for fantasy, this is a reasonable size. Let me know your favorite book that you've read this month, if you have a favorite book that you've read this month, and we will see later.
If I could stay inside my books, maybe everything would be better. Life would make more sense.